So today I'm going to make soup and scones. I'm actually going to make the soup up on the spot, but it is inspired by my book of seasonal soups by Fraser's, and the scones are going to be from the National Trust book. So let's get cooking. So to start with, we're going to heat up our pan, and I'm going to use butter in this, but you could also use oil if you are lactose intolerant or you don't like butter. And then we'll cut up our onions and garlics and get them frying. Oh, I cut these incorrectly. Took off the root.
You're not following your own advice.
I'm not following my own advice.
You cut the root off.
But no one's crying, you know? If you don't have onions or garlic, you could also use something like spring onions or leeks or celery, anything that's kind of in that family, just to make the base of your soup to start with the flavours. So just use what you have in your cupboard. And actually I think onions and garlic are quite easy to find in the shops at the moment. They're not the gold dust like the pesto. So I just use 2 cloves there. And uno onion. Turn that down. We just want them to sweat, we don't want them to get brown, so I had that a bit high. I want to make you sweat. I'm also going to do a celery stock because that's what I had in the fridge, using what we got. So we're going to make a broccoli and blue cheese soup, but you can really put any vegetable you want in soup. I also like to use sweet potatoes and carrots and flavour that with smoked paprika, which is one of the best seasonings, I think. Or you could use courgettes or peppers, lentils, whatever you have in the house basically, you can probably turn into soup. But yeah, I'm going to do broccoli today because that's what we had in, and we also have some in the freezer. I'm okay with frozen vegetables, so we're going to chuck some of those in too. And we'll just cut these up. Not too bothered about how big these are. That's looking good to me. I'm going to add in the broccoli. All that green goodness right in there. Oh baby. I'm going to put the lid on for a little bit just to let that cook, and then we will add our stock. So I think that's probably cooked enough. I just did that for a few minutes really, just so that the vegetables could cook a little bit on their own and take a bit of the edge off their hardness. Then we're going to add our stock. So you've done your base of your onions or whatever you put in your base, and then your vegetables, and now the stock. I'm using some chicken stock that I made this week, but you could also just use a stock cube. I think probably about 1.2 litres to 1.5. So I'm also going to top this up. We'll probably start with that liquid. We can always add more at the end, but I think that's a good amount. And then we'll season with salt and pepper, and we will leave, we'll bring it to the boil, and then we'll leave it to simmer for maybe 20 minutes, and then we'll see from there. So I'm going to show you how to make some scones now to go with the soup. I think soup and scones is one of my favourite meals, and I do think soup and scones is a meal. Unless you've done like a lot of exercise, I think it fills you up. But each scone recipe is slightly different amount of ingredients, so if you want to do a different type, just look on the internet to find a recipe. But I'll show you kind of some tips of how to make a good scone. So we're going to start with 300 grams of plain flour and 300 grams of self-raising flour. So use 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Oops. A pinch of salt. So all of our dried ingredients are in the bowl. Then we'll add our butter. So we need 160 grams of unsalted butter. And the reason we're doing unsalted is so we can add our own salt, so we know how much salt we put in. You can't control that if you buy salted butter. And we want to cut this up into cubes so it's easier to work with later. And that just goes in like this. Jamie would have pre-cut it.
Jamie would have had someone else pre-cut it. That's what Jamie's kids are doing as homeschool.
Now we're gonna use our fingers and kind of work it until it looks like fine breadcrumbs. You just push the butter in between your fingers with the flour mix. So now we've got to this consistency, but there might be some lumps underneath, so the way to check is just to tap it and they should rise to the top, you see here. And we'll just keep rubbing those in. But we're almost there. We're gonna just put a tablespoon of sugar in, which I should have done earlier, but I forgot, and just mix that in. And then I've just toasted some hazelnuts, 85 grams of hazelnuts, and we're gonna chop them until they're finely chopped. This is the hard bit, because they always run away from you. We've chopped up our hazelnuts. If you don't have hazelnuts, you could use any kind of nut that you have, but I really like the flavour of hazelnuts, so that's what we've gone for. So we'll put those in, and then I crumbled and grated 120 grams of cheese. We're using blue cheese and cheddar. The recipe called for just blue cheese, but we didn't have enough, so cheddar it is. I'll put that in and then just mix it all around so it's evenly distributed. And then we're adding 200 ml of milk to start with, and we'll leave about 100 ml in our jug, and we'll just mix it around with a fork to start with so your hand doesn't get super messy. And we want to bring it together until it's a sticky dough, but it's not super sticky. So as you can see, I have a little bit of milk left. I didn't use it all, but it's between 200 to 300 millilitres of milk, and I brought it all together in a nice smooth dough. We're going to put it out on a lightly floured surface. We don't want to work the dough too much, because we want it to be rustic and nice and crummy. So we'll just leave it like that, and then a little bit of flour on top, and we'll roll out to about a 3 centimetre height. Yeah, we want our scones to be short. That is how I like mine. Crumbly. Now this bit's important that you don't twist your cutter, because that will change the structure of the scone. You just want to push right down and bring it up again. And we'll do that for all of them. If you don't have a cookie cutter, do not fret. You could use a glass or just something that has a hole in it. And if you don't have a rolling pin, do not fret. I've used a wine bottle before, or just something that is smooth that you can roll over. We then put them on our prepared baking sheets. I've used these silicone mats, which I really like because then you're not throwing out lots of baking paper. But you don't have to use these. You could have a tray with baking paper on, or you could just put a little bit of flour over the baking tray if you don't have baking paper. And then we're just going to brush them with milk. The recipe calls for egg here, but because there's an egg shortage at the moment, milk just does the same job. So then we're going to put them in a preheated oven that's heated to 190 degrees C, and they'll go in for about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll definitely check them after 15 because my oven is particularly hot. But they just want to be golden and risen. So that's on for 15 minutes. So I've tested the broccoli and it's now soft enough. So I'm going to crumble in some blue cheese. This is just the last of the cheese that we had. You could also use any other kind of cheese. Sometimes if I do a sweet potato soup, I like to add coconut milk or coconut cream just to make it a bit more creamy. But you don't actually have to add any dairy if you don't like dairy. It's just basically what you have in your cupboard or your fridge. And we'll let that just get involved in there for a bit. Now we're going to do the fun bit, which is the liquidizing. So now it's nice and smooth. I'm going to give it a little bit of a taste. I love the saltiness of the cheese. Alright, we're ready to serve that up. Let's go wait for our scones. So it's been 15 minutes. And these little beauties have risen all golden. They're pretty much done. Fully golden. And we'll just put them on this rack so that they will dry out properly. So we'll just ladle this soup right on into those bowls and take those bowls right on into the dining room. There we have it. Broccoli and Stilton soup and hazelnut and Stilton scones. Grubs up!